Today's episode is special. You're going to get to meet my friend Kim Zuroff, who is like an everyday leader, leading teams, leading people every single day, and is one of the most experienced practical leadership experts on the planet. She's going to help you to be able to go on to live more of a life by design, help others live a life by design. She's a fast growth transformational specialist who's helped businesses go from here to here on repeat. She's coached and consulted others, and her greatest student to date is probably herself. So if you're keen to understand how you can lead people better, how you can lead yourself better, and what's involved in you becoming the leader you were born to be, then this one's for you. So Kim, in business, a lot of people find themselves in a situation where they either become an accidental leader or they promote somebody into a position of accidental leadership. Mm-hmm. You've been growing leaders and being a leader for yourself for some time. What are some of the things that you've learned that you can't unlearn when it comes to being able to survive accidental leadership?
Yeah, I think the first thing that we can dive into there is being your authentic self as a leader. Because if you're not your authentic self and you are just showing up as who you think you need to be, it's not going to attract the people around you that you need around you to go where you need to go.
I love that, but it's beautifully cliche. There's so much talk right now about you need to be authentic. You just need to be your authentic self. In my experiences, like I've been multiple selves. Most days I have to show up as multiple selves. How does that exist in reality? Because I think you find yourself in a leadership position and you've read the books or you've seen others or you've got poster children of what a leader looks like from either proxy mentors or real mentors. How does it actually show up? And what might you be doing that's the opposite of that?
Yeah, so I think when you show up in a situation, it's like you need to be who you need to be for that given situation. And every situation looks a little bit different.
Okay.
And yet that can be tied back to, how are you authentically showing up in that situation as yourself? In those situations, your authentic self might look a little bit different in each given situation based off of, where it is that you are needing to take people.
Okay. So what are the situations like? Because are these like random or are some of them kind of known?
Some of them are pretty known, so I think, if you're in a situation of leadership, one of the things that people do frequently is they hold people accountable to help them get results.
Okay.
And so showing up in that conversation and being able to relate back to them and really understand what's the angle that they are needing to go forward to, you've likely been there.
Okay. So one is holding people accountable to results. What are others of known situations that you're going to have to show up as an authentic leader?
In situations of objection or a challenge.
Okay.
And authenticity in that type of environment, would look like not showing up as having all the answers.
Okay.
I think in leadership, one of the things I've learned is that it's okay to not have the answers. It's not okay to not go find the answers.
Okay.
So if you're presented with an issue where you don't really understand it or you need to know where you need to go, it's your authentic self is admitting that.
Okay. So moments where you're holding people accountable to results, moments of objection or challenge. What are other situations or moments people find themselves in as known as leaders where they have to show up with more authenticity?
In presenting the vision.
Okay.
Right. So where are we taking the vision of the company, organization?
Okay. Because people want to know where you're going, right? They don't want to know what to do. They want to know direction of travel.
Absolutely.
Okay. Anything else?
I think in business as well as it kind of parlays into every aspect of life.
Okay.
Right. So the different areas of life of, your personal life, your business life, the financials, every different area of life, like your authentic self is important in each area of life in addition to business.
Okay. From your own experience, where have there been examples where inauthenticity has been costly to you?
In a huge way, right? So it's getting buy-in from people in organizations. So a big part of my track record is I've been a leader responsible for brokerages and, showing up in that environment. Initially, I wanted to kind of have a positional leadership mindset of, well, I'm now in this position, so you should trust me versus, me meeting people where they're at, helping take them where they need to go by being my authentic self. And it was very costly because it prolonged the amount of time it took for me to get in a relationship with people.
Okay.
Because relationships are built based off of, people connecting with people. And a lot of that is driven highly by authenticity.
Okay.
And so it cost me probably a couple of years of being able to move things forward because I was kind of stuck and there was like a barrier up for me to be in a relationship with people.
Okay. So this was almost a mistake of being like, I'm your boss, you should listen to me. That was a situation of where you were expecting respect or expecting people to come to where you needed them to be, as opposed to showing up in their world and helping give them the resources, support, advice, and guidance they needed based on their situation, as opposed to them getting to yours.
Correct.
Okay. And the consequences of this was no relationship.
Mm-hmm.
What was the consequences of not having relationships?
When you don't have relationships with the people that you're, because one of the big things that I was actually helping them do was grow their business.
Right.
Right. And in the absence of relationship, there's absence of progress.
Okay.
From what I've experienced.
And what did that look like in reality?
What it looked like in reality, is the people around me wouldn't come to me with specific situations and scenarios because they didn't necessarily trust that I would show up in an authentic way. So there was an absence of trust.
Okay. And let's stay on that for a second. What consequences are experienced when trust isn't present?
A whole myriad of them. Right?
Come on, we're on camera right now. Like what? Like what? What do we need to be wary of?
Yeah, I mean, I think when they're in the absence of trust, there's conversations that don't happen that have to happen.
Right.
In the absence of trust, people operate in silos. They don't necessarily feel safe.
Okay.
And if you're operating in silos versus operating as a team, it's going to slow down the progress that can be made inside of the company, inside of the organization.
Okay.
That's one of the big things that we've experienced is for a number of years, we were as a team operating in silos.
Right.
And now that we have teamified versus working in silos, our progress has pretty much jumped in a rocket ship and taken off.
Mm-hmm.
But until that trust is built, in the absence of trust, people don't necessarily feel safe. If people don't feel safe, they're not, you're not really going to understand what's going on inside of their worlds that may be, hey, they're crushing it right now. What's leading to them crushing it?
Right.
Or if they're not performing, what's behind the curtain as to why they're not performing? And that's, if you don't have trust, you're never really going to get behind the curtain.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing from you here is the consequences aren't necessarily like pandemonium and chaos. The consequences aren't necessarily like people are jumping ship and looking to be able to leave and go elsewhere or try and start new careers. Often the consequences of not having well-developed relationships, not showing up as your authentic self, not having true connection with your employers or your teammates is the highest potential negative consequence is mediocrity.
100%.
It's like, it's all right.
Yeah.
And what could be the potential financial consequences of that? Like if a business was capable of doing 10 million a year, what is happening if it's not got well engaged, authentic leadership and trust? Where is it at by comparison?
Yeah. I mean, so in terms of a numbers perspective, it could really be anywhere. And yet what the consequence of mediocrity in that situation is that if we aren't reaching our potential, it's likely that the people inside the organization aren't getting what they want.
Yeah.
And part of leadership is building a world big enough to help other people inside your organization get what they want.
Okay.
And so if an organization is not reaching its potential, you might have the consequence of losing really talented leaders that aren't getting what they want.
Wow.
And they may move on to different opportunities in search of what they're looking for.
Okay. So what you actually do is you lose your A players.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Why are so many leaders fixers? Why do so many people who find themselves in leadership roles think, well, I'm going to fix you, or I'm going to fix the problem, or I'm going to tell you how it should be done differently? Why do you think that's true?
I think it's because they think it has to look a certain way. And one of the things that I've learned over the years is that there's a lot of ways that you can get to the end result.
Okay.
And as leaders, we have to be open to different perspectives. However, a lot of times leaders who are high achievers, high drivers, they see it a certain way that they don't slow down enough to appreciate the different perspectives and different ways that they can get the same end result. It might just look a little bit different.
Okay.
And that's something I personally struggle with, in my early leadership journey of, being okay with it being done and having it not be my way was an opportunity for me to grow.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did you realize that opportunity? What actually happened? Come and tell us the story behind that.
Burnout, right? It's like you work so much and you have great people around you, but you're not giving them the space to be great. And that can be defeating in so many ways for the people on your team. If you have people on your team that are talented and they're there for a purpose, and then you redo what they do, it doesn't serve anybody, right? Like, so let's just say you have a great marketing person and they make a piece. You don't necessarily love it, so you just go change it without having a conversation.
Okay.
And, that defeats their excitement and thought process around it.
Okay. So it's like hiring a chef and then doing the cooking.
Exactly.
You do a lot of work inside the real estate space and with entrepreneurs that are there. Where are the examples that we see repeatedly from leaders doing it for them as opposed to doing it with them?
In conversations, right? So, for example, if there's a top agent that has agents on their team and there is an objection or a conflict or a situation that happens with a client, they'll have the conversation around them instead of with them.
Got it.
To teach and engage them. And that's a huge one. If people grow into the conversations you create around them.
Okay.
And if you don't have those conversations with the people, they're not going to be able to grow in the conversations with you.
Okay.
So that's one example. I mean, other examples are in terms of, how we service clients, right? Is as leaders, we expect a certain level of service, because that's why I believe clients work with us, is they work with us because of the level of service we give and the reputation that we have. And as leaders, our job is to develop people to give that same level of service. And instead of taking the time to role model and role play and help them build those skills, they do it around them instead of with them.
So it's almost jumping straight into this. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to do it for you. Don't worry, I got you.
Yeah.
And it's almost becoming a slave to the solution as opposed to helping teach somebody to be able to resolve this situation again in the future.
Yeah. And leaders often have the mindset of, I do it the best. So the only way it's going to, they have like a control thing of, they want to do it because they feel like unless they do it, it's not going to be as good as what it would be if they would do it.
Okay.
So a lot of leaders are really challenged with asking for help.
I'm going to come back to that in a minute, is why leaders struggle to ask for help. Well, this is an empowerment issue, right? Like that's what we're talking about here, is that most leaders find it very difficult to empower others to be able to drive results. And why? Why do we think most leaders struggle with this? Like what's happening behind here or in here that is meaning that the majority of leaders still jump to this fixed mode? Let me do it. Let me take care of it. What's happening behind the scenes that's causing that?
It's a mindset.
Okay.
A leadership mindset. I don't know if it's an imposter syndrome, right? Of, they don't want to, they don't have it fully figured out. So how can they teach somebody if they don't have it figured out?
Yeah.
That's kind of where I think with that one is a lot of times they don't feel like inside of themselves they have it mastered enough to be able to empower others. And in leadership, we are best equipped to help people in situations that we've lived through and been through.
Yeah. In some ways we are.
In some ways.
Yeah, in some ways. And, you look at it in the world of sports, it's quite often some of the best coaches, the best leaders in the world of sports aren't people who excelled in the game to anywhere near that standard. Is what they've been able to do is to achieve results through others that far surpassed any of the results they're able to achieve through themselves. I've been pondering this whole thing for a while. It's like, why do so many people jump straight to the let me do it, let me get it done? And I was in a conversation with my friend Jamie Kern-Lima, who wrote the book Worthy and has outkicked a number of self-imposed levels of what could be achieved. And her response around this was that people can't play through what they see as their own self-worth. And maybe that's what it is here for some leaders, is they attach their self-worth to fixing. They attach their self-worth to, well, I'm only valuable in my role as a team leader in this business, as an operating partner in this business, as some form of manager or director in this business if I'm solving problems, not I'm getting problems solved. And that's a big difference, right? Is your job is to solve problems. Your job is not necessarily to be the person that solved that problem.
100%.
So how does somebody break through this? How does somebody go from being I was given a leadership role to becoming a great leader? What's the journey?
That's an awesome question, right? And I think the journey starts first with them getting a really big foundation of leading themselves really well.
Okay.
Because just because we're given a title doesn't mean we actually know how to lead people. And I think that was one of my very humbling things, stepping into leadership at 24, 25, leading pretty big organizations, is that I figured out that I had to earn the right to lead other people. And that began by mastering myself first.
Okay.
And so mastering the self-leadership, if you ask a lot of leaders, how well do you lead yourself with the habits and the mindset and the beliefs? It starts with leading yourself really well.
Well, how do you do that?
It's in how you think. It's in your mindset. It's in your beliefs. It's in your habits. And self-leadership is how are you showing up on a daily basis that is role modeling the behavior that you would expect from the people around you. And so for me personally, when I started showing up how I would expect the people around me to show up, that's when it kind of clicked.
Okay.
Is because instead of telling them what to do, show them what to do. And so it's leading yourself to show up how you expect the people around you to show up.
Where was the moment where that clicked for you?
I mean, I think it really began when I was in the military, is because they, the people that trained and developed me, showed up at such a high level and had such a high level of standards and expectations, that's kind of where it began, and I did have leadership positions in the military, but then, when I got into real estate brokerage leadership, I was a silo marching up a hill alone. And, you can get anywhere. Like if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Yeah.
And we were hitting ceilings of achievement. And until I realized hey, I have to show up in a certain way and show them what I expect. And then eventually it's your actions speak way louder than your words.
Right. I'm going to go deeper on this with you as well. And if we're looking to master leadership and that this is about your mindset and your habits, what I admire about running teams in businesses like real estate or direct sales, etc., is you have largely a volunteer army. Right? If we're going to go back to the military metaphor, is these people are not contractually obligated to do things inside of a job description. They have a lot of freedom and autonomy on the actions and behaviors that they do on a daily basis. And sure, you might have an employee team to be able to support part of that operation, but you can't make people do stuff through their job description or contracts, or it's a lot harder to fire people when they're not employed. So it's one of the purest forms of leadership. And whether you're leading a real estate team or whether you're leading any other area of your life, I think we could learn something from saying, well, what are the mindsets and what are the habits that would show up for you to be an effective leader in these environments? Let's start with mindset. Like what are the story you tell yourself? What are the attributes that need to exist in mindset for you to master self-leadership in this volunteer army environment?
Yeah, I mean, that's a conversation that we often have as a team, is the fact that, all the people at our brokerage, they're 1099, right? And so there's a huge difference between leading employees and leading self-employed people.
Right.
And, one of my early mentors, they said, look, you can drag a horse to water, you can't make them drink. And yet if you're a great leader, you're going to put enough salt to make them thirsty.
Yep.
And so that's kind of been my motto, is we need to create an environment where we understand where they want to go. We understand why that's important to them, understanding people's, big whys, they call it.
Yeah.
And the purpose and the drivers of, where they want to go. And then providing this, being the bridge and being the solution to having that environment and all the things they need to get what they want. That's kind of been my motto of, this is how we help people get where they want to go, is by providing an environment that makes them thirsty enough to show up and do what they need to do to get what they want.
So that's a North Star in leadership, is right?
Yeah.
Is that, help understand what makes them thirsty, be the bridge. It's about them, not you. But what mindset do you need to have internally to be able to be that bridge?
It kind of goes back to the whole worthy aspect.
Okay.
Like, I'm worthy of leading. Like, having the mindset that I'm a great leader.
Okay.
Having the mindset that, I have the ability and the skills to lead the people around me.
Okay.
It's having the resilience. Like, there's a whole resilience and grit component to this, because things in leadership are not easy.
Okay.
And, as a leader, you need to have a certain amount of resilience to keep getting back up and keep showing up, because the people around you depend on you to keep showing up. And so those are a few of the mindsets, I think, relative to leadership.
So I'm telling myself I'm a great leader I'm aware that I need to have resilience and grit, and I keep showing up. What else needs to exist in this mindset? That doesn't feel like it's complete. Because if I'm at home today thinking, right, I'm going to tell myself I'm a great leader, I'm going to have resilience and grit, and I'm going to keep showing up, is that going to make me a successful leader?
Not fully. I think I think another mindset is having the mindset that you haven't reached the top of the mountain. There's no finish line.
Okay. I like that.
And I think in my early leadership journey, I was always trying to cross the finish line. And then I realized that the finish line kept moving.
Right. There's no there, right?
So having the mindset that you haven't arrived and always being a student.
Yeah.
And I think, in terms of me being a great leader, I'm a great leader largely because I've had a lot of people that have come before me and poured into me. And I've had the mindset that I'm a student. And I have something to learn from every conversation and every situation I get from. So having the mindset that you haven't arrived, and having the mindset that, there's something that you can learn from every conversation if you look for it.
Mm-hmm. I remember a conversation with a group of people about, like, what would it take to be able to score a goal in a soccer game? Mm-hmm. And people would come up with lots of different answers of, like, I need to be in the right position. I need to have a strong mindset. I need to have self-belief that I can be able to get the goal. I need to be able to create enough space. I need to practice my craft. And they had this whole list of things that they needed to be able to do to put to score a goal on a soccer pitch. And after all of those things, I got them to realize that the missing ingredient in all of that shopping list of things is they needed to have the ball. Like, they could have all of those other things going on, but without actually having the ball at their feet, they've got no chance of being able to score at the goal, or no chance of having the ball at their head. And what you're listing out here is a lot of the things that are inside your control. Mm-hmm. These are mindsets that you've got the ability to be able to work on. And I think if more leaders actually had the belief that they were a great leader, is that they were aware that resilience and grit were attributes that were necessary, not just hopeful, mm-hmm. is that they would keep showing up regardless of whether it would rain or shine, or they would decide that there is no finish line. That's about always keeping the ball in play, right? That's always keeping mm-hmm. the ball in play. And I wrote a couple of other things here as well, which was always being a student. And then one that's been true to me as a mindset as a leader is that everything is figure outable. Like, it's 100%. Just believing that everything is always figure outable. Like, mm-hmm. there's not a right and a wrong, and every problem has a solution, and every situation and scenario has a solve for it. Mm-hmm. Is that way you don't get stuck. Mm-hmm. And I think lots of leaders get stuck because they believe in a right and a wrong. They're not happy to play in the gray space, and they forget how much of the ball they have if they're prepared to be able to control their controllables.
Well, and I think one thing to add to that is that sometimes in leadership, we want the answer faster than it appears.
Right.
And so there's a lack of patience at times.
We need a mindset of patience too.
Yeah. Cause we want to have things figured out in a certain time frame.
Yeah.
Yet maybe we're not allowing enough time for the answer to show up.
And it almost always takes about 3 times as long, and it's about 10 times as hard, and it's going to cost you about 5 times the amount of money as what you thought it would be to achieve the outcome that is about a fraction of what it was that you hoped it to be.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times I had this conversation with a friend the other day. I said, the idea is fantastic, and let me know how the execution goes.
Right.
Because in leadership, we can think a lot of things, we can have a lot of great ideas. And when it comes down to the execution is where the challenges and the opportunities arise for us to really, figure out, okay.
I've learned another mindset that's really important is to be happy in disappointment.
Yeah.
is to understand that almost nothing's going to go as well as you hope it would.
Oh, always plan for the plan and not go according to plan.
Right.
That's the mindset I've learned.
Yeah,
So.
just be happy, disappointed, yet still relentlessly optimistic for next time.
Yeah, so like the mindset of flexibility.
Yeah.
You know, is having an idea, but being okay with pivots happening.
Mm-hmm. Kim, talk me through some of the habits that exist for you that help you continually show up as a good leader.
So my habits, I'm a very self-disciplined person, right? So I think a very powerful morning routine helps set your day up for success.
Mm-hmm.
And it's making sure that you put your own oxygen mask on first. And for us, for everybody, it may look a little bit different on like what makes you feel great.
Okay.
You know, I know for me, like what makes me feel great is when I wake up in the morning, I'm not rushed. I love a morning that's not rushed. I have time to work out. I have time to think. I have time to maybe read a little bit. I have time to, fuel myself, with electrolytes, good food, whatever, before I go hit the office, and, for me also it's having a pretty structured morning, but then a lot of flexibility in the afternoons, to kind of, take the day where it needs to go. Having a set of appointments, so as far as, the habits and the routine and the mindset is, I'm a reader, I'm a learner. I'm always studying something, listening to something. I am always working on becoming the best version of myself, with my mindset, with my health, with, every different area of life. That's just a few things.
It's a good number of things.
Yeah.
I love this structure piece as well. And so many of us were a lot happier when we went to school, where it was like, you do this on a Monday and here's first period, second period, third period. Like we knew what the structure of a week would look like. And on Thursdays I do this and on Tuesdays I do the other. And, our efficiency and calm in that. Yet we find ourselves in leadership roles where we're like, I'm going to make this up as I go along. And, you wake up and the first thing you do is you check your phone and you jump straight towards dealing with a fire that was actually preventable. And you crash the first half of your day trying to deal with something because your habits weren't in line with the things that give you space. And I like the structure that you're building and even just being aware that you have hyper-focused mornings and freedom in afternoons to play. Like that's a good lesson for people. So hopefully you're learning to be a slightly better leader than you were yesterday. And hopefully this conversation has had you scribbling down notes or at least maybe anchoring some thoughts to what you can do differently. If you're finding this conversation useful in any way, shape or form, would like to be first to hear about future Exactly shows, then the only way that happens and the only way we get this information to other people is for you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and please, pretty please, be kind enough to leave a comment as to something that has been valuable to you from today's episode. So we got the right mindset, we got the right habits. I think we're missing something, which is skills. And most of us in any area of our job, we're aware that we need to have certain skills in order to be able to deliver levels of excellence in that role. It's not easy or often aware of what are the skills that people need to have to be effective leaders. Because your habits could be on point and your mindset could be on point, but if you're lacking the skills, you may not get the results. So if we were to write a list of like skills that should be worthy of being worked on all the time, or skills that maybe have gaps for many leaders, what would be a top 10 of skills that every leader should either be relentlessly working on or should actively look to be able to upskill themselves in right now to be relevant in a modern world?
Yeah. I think, in terms of skills, I think number one is communication.
Okay.
Communication skills are wildly important. And it's the frameworks of conversations.
Okay.
That's a big skill. Negotiating, because in leadership, in my opinion, we're always negotiating something.
Yeah.
And so negotiation skills, sales skills, relationship skills, relationship/people skills. Right, being able to meet people where they're at. I think there's an empathy. And there's an empathy/compassionate skill. There's a patient skill. There's a teaching/presenting, leadership, speaking skills.
What else could we be adding to this list of skills that are essential? I think there are kind of market awareness skills, right? Is understanding the field of play.
100%.
Two more. What else would be skills that are worthy of working on right now? I think there are technological skills. Is understanding how technology can support you, whether that is understanding how to more effectively get value and information out of software tools that you've plugged into or invested in, etc. Is like the skills to be able to maximize the data it can teach you, or it's the skills in technology to allow you to amplify your reach or your impact.
Yeah.
I'm going to add one. Copywriting.
In a huge way. Would, when it comes to market awareness, right, I think another thing that I don't know if this kind of parlays into it is like understanding your competition, like understanding value propositions and understanding pain points of your client base so that you can be that, so you build that bridge and be that solution.
Yeah.
I don't know how to really encompass that in.
Yeah, and I think some of that is listening and empathy again there as well, right? And like, if I'm to talk directly to you folks at home right now, is if you are looking to level up your leadership skills, firstly, don't look backwards, look forwards. Look towards who is the leader you'd like to become, and judging yourself through the lens of the leader you'd like to grow into on a scale of 1 to 10 is how good are your communication skills, with 1 being that you're kind of okay at it and 10 being you're the best in the world. And what about the same on your negotiation skills? And then on your presentation or your training skills, or your sales and influence skills, or your relationship or people skills, or your listening or your empathy skills, or your ability to show patience and hold space for others. How good are your skills there? And then market awareness and overall awareness of the field of play that you're operating. Where are your skills there? And then access and use of technology, and then copywriting. Like, you can look at those 10 things and mark yourself 1 to 10. And the action I'd probably take is take your 3 lowest scores and make those the 3 areas of skill improvement that you're looking to work on next. Would you agree with that, Kim, or would you add anything?
I'd agree with that. Like, that's a pretty good list. And, if you were a 10 in all those things, would you see yourself as a great leader?
And if not, you've probably got something wrong with your definition or your judgments, your scorecard, right?
Yeah.
And I think many of us as leaders, we find ourselves spending more time doing the things that we like to do, as opposed to the things that we need to do, or the things that we're good at, or the things that are going to have the biggest impact. It's the things that we like to do. I've learned that people do 2 things in life. They do what they enjoy doing and what they get checked on.
Yeah. When
you find yourself in a leadership role where you maybe don't have the same checks and balances to the accountability of how you use your time, what you look to better work on as a skill, where you're operating out of character from a mindset or an attitude point of view, how do you know whether you're on track or off track? How do you keep yourself honest to yourself and your own goals and aspirations when there's nobody that's naturally doing the checking?
Yeah, so I think, as a leader, it's thinking about, who else is impacted by the way I'm showing up.
Okay.
And that reach goes much further than ourselves, right? So if you have families, right, families are a huge way of holding yourself accountable. Because if I don't show up doing what I need to do, even if nobody's checking on me, who is going to be impacted by my actions? Right. It's all the people around you, right? So it's your family. It could be your friends. Like, if you are not managed with your time, and so then you have less time to be able to, stay in those relationships, build those relationships, if that's what's important to you. It's all the people that are watching you. Like, we never know who's watching us in leadership, and that's kind of the exciting and scary part, is there's always somebody watching. Yeah. And yet it's the people that we don't necessarily think of that are going to be impacted by us not doing what we need to do as leaders. So even if there's no checks and balances, even if you don't have a boss saying, hey, Phil, why didn't you do this today? Yeah. There's a much greater reach than just ourselves. And it's going to start to feel, you're going to have a lot more pain points when those other things start disintegrating. The relationships weaken. Family life comes a little bit rough at home. Right. Right. There's more conflict because you're not doing what you need to do here to be able to serve everybody else over there. Okay. So it's more than just about you as the person. There's people being impacted. It's
understanding the wider impact. And I remember a great quote, and I don't know whether it was this individual's advice or something he got from elsewhere, but an early mentor in my life, a guy by the name of Peter Lee, once said, he said, all I want to do in life is to be as good as my dog already thinks I am.
Oh yeah, that's my motto in life,
right?
Phil.
Like, it's that awareness that there is somebody else who's already looking up to you, that thinks that you are some form of marvelous being. Is like, let's not let that person's expectation of me down. So I'm going to work towards that from an accountability point of view. And then obviously there's, coaches and mentors and peer groups and mastermind groups and chances to be able to actually help you realize you're not as hot shit as you would think you are. And like, I loved moving to New York City because I thought I was doing okay. And then you get to Manhattan and you find yourself in a skyscraper looking around and seeing what some other people have done to build their lives in your business. You're like, I've done nothing. I am small fry in every capacity. It's the most humbling of cities in the world to realize that you are a very tiny, tiny speck. And there's a long way to go if aspiration and growth is what's in your future. And like, what would you do today? What would your action list be if you were like, okay, I care about being a great leader. I think I'm a pretty good leader and I'd like to be a better leader. Where would you focus your efforts and actions to be able to accelerate your career as a leader over the next 3 to 5 years if you were committed to being able to get better?
I think, if you're committed to getting better, it's like you have to look at the people that you've developed. And it's, it's like, how do people know if you're a great leader? Mm-hmm. It's by who have you developed as a leader? And so I think like if you're pretty good, and this is a season where I'm still I'm like right smack dab in the middle of, because for a long time I was so focused on, the self-leadership component, that I didn't give enough attention to developing the people around me.
Right. So you were good at leading tasks, you were good at leading self, 100%. You were good at leading projects.
Yeah. Can make a lot of stuff happen.
But creating leaders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I think, if you think you're pretty good, look around you and say, what or who is a byproduct of my leadership,
right?
And, figure out, okay, great. What does the next level of that look like?
Yeah.
Because the greater the leader you are, the more capacity you're going to have to be able to go do more things, go build a bigger world to keep attracting and developing other people.
So how good are you at creating leaders is your judgment of leadership, and not just how well do you lead the task or how well did you lead that project at that one period of time. Are you a leader that is creating more leaders? And are you prepared to create leaders that are better at things than you are? Yeah,
and that's a very humbling thing. It's like, hiring people that you're initially a little bit scared of, okay. of putting the ego aside. And, when you're in the hiring process, I always look for somebody, like I look for people that can be way better than I ever was in that particular role. Mm-hmm. And that's a very humbling thing that you have to become okay with, is that there are people out there that can be better than you were, and it might just look a little bit different. And it's being okay with that.
Many small business owners are often the visionary leader. They've been the integrator. They've hired some assistants. They've hired some support staff. And then they get to a point where they need to start hiring people with managerial or leadership responsibilities. Mm-hmm. There's a very different style of hire. Mm-hmm. What can people learn from how to hire leaders versus how to hire people that are going to get a job done?
So I think one of the things that's been really helpful for us is always hiring for the attitude, not the skill.
Okay.
Making sure that they have the right attitude, because in the absence of the right attitude, attitude and kindness and care can't really be taught. Okay. People are going to care or they're not going to care. And so hiring for the attitude and understanding that we can train for the skill.
Okay.
That's one thing that we look for in anybody that's going to serve on our, leadership teams. I think looking at their track record of success, what does their track record look like? Have they been part of something bigger than themselves? Okay. Have they created something? Or have they hopped around? So those are a few things that we look for in hiring leaders.
Okay. What do you see about differences between high caliber entrepreneurial leaders and high caliber employed leaders? Because I don't say one's better than the other, but they're very different types of leaders, right? Somebody who's in an employed position, whether that's the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, or whether that is a team leader inside of a real estate business, that's an employed leader versus an entrepreneurial leader is Somebody does more things like what I do or what you do, or what a Gary Keller does in the world, where they are creating new worlds for people to be able to live in. What do you see as the difference between those two types of leader? Here's my current thoughts, just even thinking this through as I asked it of you, is I think entrepreneurial leaders are very, very good at creating boundaries. So they have, a net that's this wide that they could potentially play in, but they create self-imposed constraints in order to be able to accelerate success. And employed leaders are very good at working within predetermined constraints. Like, that's about the only very black and white difference I can see, is like entrepreneurial leaders, they build the walls. Mm-hmm. And employed leaders work very well inside the walls that were built by somebody else. They're still highly creative, highly responsible, highly diligent roles. But are you the person that's putting the walls up, or are you the person that's working within the walls, would be my delineation between the two. And I'm going to give you another thing to try and delineate between, which is leaders and bosses. What's the difference between a leader and a boss?
I think a leader is somebody that teaches somebody how to think, and a boss is somebody that tells somebody what to do.
There you go. That one's clean. Think versus do. You mentioned earlier on that leaders should be continually learning, that leaders should definitely be focused on their own personal development. I still believe that one of the greatest life hacks that anybody can have in any area of growth they're going through in their world is books. I do not know a greater value ROI that you can get on an educational experience than taking somebody's chapter of life's work that has been condensed and edited and formatted into a beautifully illustrated manuscript and consuming that in 2 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours. Like, it's a life hack to get through books. So why don't we jam as we bring our conversation towards a close as to what do we think 10 books are that every aspiring leader should have in their knowledge base. You do one, I'll do one. You do one, I'll do one. Let's see if we can get to 10. Kick us off.
Yeah, it's a lot of books.
I know, right? But if you're a leader, you should have read at least 10 books, right?
Oh, I've read way more than 10 books.
What are books that every leader should have at least some knowledge of?
So I think one of the first books that I actually read when I was 15 was The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Okay. That is essential Stephen Covey knowledge. Like, there are references to frameworks and models that exist in that book that exist in almost every leadership meeting room, whether they know it came from Covey or not. Yep. Like, that shows up everywhere. Essential reading. I will add Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. If we're talking about the importance of communication skills, there is overlapping principles in that book that could help every one of the skills that we touched on earlier that touched upon communication. What you got next?
5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
Ooh, I haven't read that yet. Yeah, that's on my bookshelf out there that I had show up recently. So I'm looking forward to digging into that one. Why that one?
Yeah, I mean, because it's very, very clear through the story that's told. It's just all of the initial, challenges and dysfunctions that teams run into when they're building. And I love that, Patrick Lencioni has a way of, through fables, giving very powerful leadership lessons for anybody in leadership.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
What do I add to this next is I think I will add The Coaching Habit by Michael Bungay-Stanier.
Okay.
And I think that is an essential skill that every leader needs to have, is to be more coach-like in their communications. So regardless of their strategic intent, regardless of their, passion, determination, habit, if they can't be coach-like in their conversations, they're missing a trick. And Michael's book, to me, is essential reading for every leader.
Mm-hmm. Love it. I'm going to throw this one there. You're going to love me for it. Is The One Thing.
Of course.
By Gary Keller and Jay Papasan.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would be most disappointed if that didn't make the list in some way, shape, or form. Okay. And why?
It's a lot of the foundational principles and mindsets of leadership, productivity, goal setting, helping people refine and get clarity in their vision, defining what their, their lead domino is in life.
Well, that works. Yeah. I got to think of one next that I believe is essential. I'd say Dan Martell's Buy Back Your Time. It's a more modern book. It is something that was published more recently, and it is the most relevant approach to quote unquote time management that applies in a modern world where our role as leaders treads over the workplace and home life and personal life and and habits and goals that live inside of us as humans. I think that book delivers so much bang for its buck. The leadership principles in that book are abundant.
Yeah. I'm going to throw this one in there. It's The Gifts of Imperfection, Brene Brown.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Why?
Because as leaders, there's a lot of leadership, and that's more of like the self-leadership box of understanding that there's a lot of gifts in every component of who we are as human beings.
Yeah.
And just being okay with, all of the gifts that we may see as imperfect flaws might be perfect for somebody else.
Okay.
So that's a very much of a self-leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm going to put a lesser known book in here that I think is insanely valuable. It's a book by a guy by the name of Cody Shewan, and it's called Everyday Legacy.
Okay.
And Cody has done a huge amount of work in the funeral direction space, and obviously deals with death a great deal as a result of which. And we often look at legacy as something that is created after we've lived. And there is a huge number of principles and methodology through Cody's work that helps us realize that we're building a legacy every single day, and you don't leave a legacy, you live a legacy. And I think for a lot of modern leaders, it's an easy point to miss.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd put that into the mix of essential reading that helps us become better leaders. So what have we done? We've done 8. Is that right? You've got 1 more to go.
Yeah, I think that I'm going to put in there Simon Sinek's Start With Why.
Okay.
And or, I'm not going to take the 10th one away from you, right? The Infinite Game is also by Simon. So
Yep.
It could be one of those books. Understanding the game we're playing and having an infinite mindset is wildly important.
Okay.
So
I agree completely. And if we put some fun, lighthearted reading to be able to finish, I'd say Bob Berg's The Go-Giver. We're staying
so
on the principle parable led. It's it's an easy read. But we have grown up in a world of leadership where we sometimes think that it's a tell-based approach, whereas what Bob teaches in The Go-Giver is how much more can be achieved by being somebody is of a servant of other people's outcomes. And to come back to your point of being the bridge earlier on, I think there's a lot of lessons in Bob's work there that can help us. So we just built a pretty decent leadership list.
we just forgot your book though.
That's fine. It's fine.
That's a no-brainer.
Well, and there is a lot of interpretation for people to be able to take the core, say exactly what to say book and apply it to leadership. There's a translation that it often needs to go through, but sure, all of the sequences of words in exactly what to say apply to leadership scenarios.
100%.
And I'd like to think that if we were jamming on a top 10 books for sales, influence, persuasion, and negotiation, that maybe the book would show up.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's a bonus for this audience is that if you get through the 10 and you're wondering how to get to 11, then exactly what to say wouldn't be a bad place to work towards. But thank you for bringing that one up. I appreciate it.
Always.
I appreciate it. Kim, final question from me to you is, what do you wish for in the world more leaders to be? So if you had a rallying cry message that said, if only more leaders were blank, what would blank be?
I feel like my answer is cliche because you're probably going to say, oh, that's cliche, right? I think authentic, vulnerable, willing, more fun. Because a lot of times in leadership, we think we have to be a certain way that we just kind of forget to have fun with what we're doing.
Well, there you have it. Kim Zuroff tells you that if you want to grow in leadership into the future, the 3 things to focus on outside of everything else we've talked about here today is to be more authentic, which means being a truer version of self, be open to being more vulnerable, and find ways of making it more fun. Kim, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.